Eric Eggers, Vice President of Research at the Government Accountability Institute. This is a fantastic organization, g-a-i.org, if you want to go there. Co-host of their podcast there, The Drilldown with Peter Schweizer. He's the author of Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. Eric, thanks for coming on.
Stacy, it's my pleasure. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well, and I was especially excited about your topic for tonight because you're talking about something, well, I think some Americans are aware. Some are maybe they're at some point of like accepting it finally. There's a lot of detail to what you're writing about and how you're going to share this with us. So I just want you to set it up. You're talking about immigration's effect on home buyers. Tell us more.
Right. Well, so we do a podcast each week. I do with Peter Schweizer, and what we sort of address actually is something we knew was coming from the Trump administration. He addressed it today. In fact, he addressed it indirectly because he spoke to a group of McDonald's franchisees. But it was about how affordable are things becoming and how expensive are things becoming, and specifically the cost of home ownership. And so the podcast we did this week is the idea that there are forces at work who want us to become a nation of renters. When Donald Trump and his administration are introducing the idea of a 50-year mortgage, they're trying to figure out whatever they can to make home buying more affordable. And what we unpacked is the reason why they're trying to come up with any idea to make home buying more affordable is because it's become incredibly expensive. Now, why has it become expensive? Obviously, interest rates are high, but what's also true is a byproduct of the significant increase in immigration we've seen in this country under Joe Biden is we have more people than ever living here, which means things have gotten more expensive, including home ownership, which, by the way, Stacy, and you know this, it impacts every aspect of American life. Even fertility goes down by 11% when rent goes up. And when you see the massive influx of immigration you've seen, then things like homeownership become more expensive. There's environmental regulations, of course, that are part of it. In San Francisco, for example, environmental regulations have added $400,000 to the cost of a home. To put it another way, the average median cost of a house is the increase of a cost of a house in San Francisco because of environmental regulations. And what we get into is the Venn diagram of people who want more environmental regulations and the people who want more immigration in this country is significant. So unfortunately, you add it all up and you see there are forces at work who want things to become more expensive. They want more people living here, and they want you to own less.
So you broke that down for us. And the reality is it's more than one factor. But the one you're naming off as the most insidious is the people who keep telling us that if we don't want illegal immigrants here, it's because of xenophobia, when really it's just the basics. Like, you can't get an appointment at the doctor's office. If you have an emergency, you can't get seen at the ER. You can't find an apartment to rent. Even though they seem to be putting up apartment blocks every other month, you still can't find an apartment to rent. And worse than that, if you've done everything right, you saved up some money, you go to buy a house, there's bidding wars for them. So a tiny little starter home is going for $325,000, which then, as you said, people just put off buying. They put off having a family. And before you know it, you're mid-30s, your eggs are old. You're like, maybe we should just adopt, or we have 2 dogs. That's going to be it for us. And then we're cemented into this new reality, which I, for one, don't want. I don't want young people foregoing having children and putting their lives on hold.
It's after 11 o'clock on the East Coast, but things get dark quick when you go on that monologue, Stacy. I mean, right, you just enter this worldview where he's like, then this, then this, then this, and it does become, unfortunately, they're all related, and it's weird, and you don't want to be one of those people that says this is how they want it to be. But what's true is the World Economic Forum in 2016 had someone publish a study called, quote, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy," and that, by the way, was from an article titled "Welcome to 2030." So, we're 5 years away, almost 4 years away from that goal being realized. And no, absolutely, like the open border push is real. We talk about stats that show, I think it's like 25% of household growth came from non-native born people living here, 16% of all households headed by an immigrant as of 2 years ago. Even the FHA saw a 300% increase in terms of non-citizens getting loans, so much that the Trump administration put a stop to it. Now, it's from a real number standpoint, it's maybe not huge, but it was a trend, and it's all competitive in the marketplace. So, when interest rates aren't low, the dollars matter, and obviously the Trump administration is trying to take on this affordability crisis head on, but housing is chief among those problems.
So what's the first answer to what you're describing here? Because when you said it gets dark on the East Coast, it got dark here. I felt like it was dark at 4 o'clock. I know we're not there yet, but we're getting there. I mean, it's getting dark so early. I'm like, what day is it? Where am I? It's traumatizing.
Your producer told me you're in the Midwest. I'm actually in Florida, which is how you know I love you, for the record, because it's after 11 o'clock on the East Coast here in town. And I live in the Sunshine State. We're used to things being bright and sunny. And here we got Ron Dang DeSantis as our governor. We like sunshine. We like freedom.
America's governor. Yep.
Dude, we're getting ready to get no property tax, Stacy. Get on our level, okay? So, we're about it, but it's a real thing. And, the Trump administration is throwing anything they can. They're talking about $2,000 stimulus checks. They're talking about, the 50-year mortgage. They're talking about, they're even going to look at healthcare. They care that much about it. So they're doing whatever they can. But the reality is that when you have let this many people in the country, and you have the interest rates have been allowed to get what they have been, it's a real problem, and they recognize this is something. I mean, I'm not sure how much you broke down the election results of a couple weeks ago, but at the end of the day, I think it's a direct reflection of America's dissatisfaction with how expensive things have become, which is why I think you saw Democrats allow the government to be shut down up until the elections in early November, because they're like, okay, cool. We're going to let the government be shut down. The economy is going to be worse in key areas, including in Virginia and New Jersey. That's going to negatively impact the economy, and that's going to be the ticket they ride, hopefully for Democrats for midterm success in 2026. And the Trump administration knows, okay, we have to do something about it, which is what they're focused on now for the next 12 months.
So, yes, we didn't go into the crosstabs on the numbers, but the Democrats won big in areas that they already had as strongholds. Virginia only recently flipped red under Glenn Youngkin, with him no longer on the ticket, and Winsome Sears not having President Trump's endorsement, and record low turnout for Republicans. It was the right mix, and the Democrats had to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and they did by keeping the government shut down. But that won't work next year. They can't shut the government down in January and keep it shut down until November of next year. They can't do it. So they're going to have to run on something else. They got socialism. But then on the heels of that, you just described something. When you say get at my level, my husband and I met on Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, got married there. And one of the things we said as we drove away to the Midwest 25 years ago was that we would be moving back. We would be back to Florida. And I've been holding him to that. I remind him at least once a year when we're in Florida. Remember, you promised we'd move back here one day. So it's on the horizon. But when you talk about the policies that your governor is spearheading, he's the one who's supposed to be giving the TED Talks. I renew my request for Governor Ron DeSantis to give the TED Talks to the other governors, because some of them come here first to Kehoe first, because he's allowing all kinds of things here that I can't say I agree with, and he's a Republican governor. But at the federal level, when you talk about President Trump, I understand why he says 50-year mortgage, but that's not the answer. The answer is what he's doing on the immigration side. You get these people out of here. They don't belong here. They're here illegally. You stop foreigners from being able to buy homes in our market. They have to first be here. There should be some kind of multi-step process before they can plunk money down, especially when they're getting it from our government, and buy a home ahead of Americans. And a few other things, right? There's actually quite a few things President Trump is working on that are good for this situation.
There's no doubt, but I will say that I think respectfully, the Trump administration should be working on more diligently and more consistently is communication, because what you just did, Stacy, and it makes sense to you, and you have an incredibly bright audience. It makes sense to them, but they've got to connect dots. So one of the things in the crosstabs that came out of the election results of 2 weeks ago is you saw a drop in Hispanic and Latino support for President Trump. He won in 2024 over 40% of that vote, which was, historic for that demographic at the time. That dropped in Virginia, New Jersey, et cetera, to less than a third. So it dropped from over 40% to less than 33%. And why that matters is more than 2/3 of Hispanic and Latino voters say they think the ICE and Border Patrol raids have gone too far. So if you just say, hey, like, they're deporting or arresting people that I know, and I don't know why, because those are people that I've known that have been in this country for a long time, like, you can understand why that's unpopular. But if you connect the dots and say, listen, what we're attempting to do is get rid of people who aren't in this country illegally, because those people, we have a number of studies that show, make things more expensive for you. I think that actually changes the math, and it makes the enforcement of immigration policy much more popular in a way that flips the issue and makes it a winning issue for Republicans. And that's something they have not done. And I do think their failure to do that is one thing that explains, I mean, you said, rabbit out of a hat. Other people have said, look, it's like, Spanberger wouldn't have won mayor of New York. Mamdani wouldn't have won governor of Virginia. Everything's local. However, there are some commonalities. Look, this thing matters, and they've got to communicate better. If you can connect the dots for regular voters, that the immigration enforcement helps the economy and helps make things cheaper for everyday Americans, then I actually think that changes the math and helps Republicans have a better chance a year from now.
So that was a masterclass on how to talk about this, because the Democrats have certainly got their talking points, and they don't really care if what they're saying makes sense. They just all say the same thing again and again and again until their minions say it again and again and again like automatons, and we're stuck fighting. Basically, you're fighting like a marshmallow man, because you can't land a punch on him, and the harder you hit him, the more futile things become. So we do need to learn how to talk about it in a way that's real. And the housing affordability thing, it's like our bread, our butter. It's the, first course, the second course. It's the dessert. It's the aperitif. It's everything. The housing affordability crisis, it's hitting. If you've done everything right, and, maybe you just graduated from high school, you went to an apprenticeship program, you saved money, you have good credit, you haven't bought, a Ferrari or a BMW or something that you could afford, but you've held off on that because you want a house, and you can't afford to buy one anywhere near the place where you work, within 45 minutes of it, that's not just frustrating. It's criminal. And we have a great country, but the housing market has not really rebounded from COVID, where we went into the pandemic with 1.4 million, I think, in inventory, and we still haven't gotten back there. So we got to get the people who are here illegally, and all these, there's like every kind of visa under the sun, the H6B 42,068 H, or what is all of this? It's demonic. You bring in people with bachelor's degrees to compete with Americans who have bachelor's degrees for jobs that really need a 2-year certificate, because a lot of the tech stuff, the IT stuff, help desk, you don't need a bachelor's degree for that. I know, because my son has a degree in technology, a bachelor's degree in it. He's working, he's gainfully employed, but he's competing with Indians from India who have bachelor's degrees, who are willing to work for a lot less than he is, and they only hire Indians, by the way.
And that's not an issue, by the way. As you know, the Trump administration is great on. And before we kind of delve into that, I just want, because I respect you and I respect your audience, it's not my job. I came on here to talk about, the podcast we do, The Nation of Renters, but I have to let your audience know that they just listen to greatness. There aren't very many national talk radio hosts who can use the word aperitif as casually as you did. And I just want to acknowledge that. I want to celebrate that.
Let's celebrate it.
And
I collect dictionaries.
Just take a moment and just breathe it in, because that was great. It's 11 o'clock on Monday night. Yeah.
You're the best to stay up with us.
But it was absolutely true. And, and that's one of the reasons why the Trump administration, when he says, hey, that they give answers that aren't awesome on this issue with Lori Ingram and things, they're going to have to figure that out. And that, because I don't think that's what they want on. And that's not the demographic they appeal to initially, and people have real concerns about that. And at the end of the day, I don't think Americans are xenophobic, to use the word you used earlier. I do think that they are, like, we're Americans first, you know? And when you have a kid, as you just mentioned, who can't get a job, and it turns out they're competing with people who weren't born here and maybe get put to the front of the door through some questionable decision-making policies, like, the Trump administration owes answers for that. And I think they get that, and I do think that J.D. Vance and others are helping them there. But, yeah, it's a real thing, and that's where the housing issue, you got a year. They're going to try to make interest rates lower. They're going to try to, I think, lessen environmental regulations to try to free up some supply. But at the end of the day, you know, what's the old phrase? It's the economy, stupid. Yep. And the economy starts with where you live and how much it costs you to live there. And I think that the positive news is that there does seem to be recognition that matters, and that's why you're seeing a shift in terms of what they're talking about. And I think that this affordability issue is going to become, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, whether it's McDonald's or beef, you're going to hear a lot about that. And I think they recognize they got about 8 months to figure it out, and that's what they're laser focused on.
Absolutely. All right. So you mentioned the Renters Podcast. You've already you've committed. You've committed to us. You're up with us late. You can't just stroll through and not talk about the Renters Nation podcast, because this is where people can follow on and get into that extra, like, bonus territory, learning directly from you on your show. So tell us how people can listen to it and what you're talking about there.
Stacy, hey, thanks for the question. So I do a podcast with Peter Schweizer. It's called The Drilldown with Peter Schweizer. The last episode was just about this affordability issue. What really got me, Stacy, is, this 50-year mortgage, which is insane. The last time I bought a house, I used a 15-year mortgage, and the guy that was doing the title was like, congratulations, because 30-year mortgages should be illegal. And, when you look into it and you unpack it, you realize how much money the banks give to get from this stuff. By the way, for all the talk about, like, snap fraud, which you've done podcasts on, this is just a fun little fact. There is no entitlement that costs the federal government more than the write-off for mortgage interest deduction, on your home, which, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some people think it's a very positive thing. But the point is, when I saw the 50-year mortgage thing, I was like, man, that's like, it's not good, because you're going to spend so much more money on a home, and the banks are just going to cash in on it the whole way. So those are the types of issues we do with Peter Schweizer on the Drilldown. With, hey, what's an issue that kind of plagues American society? Everyone sort of recognizes it's not great and it's not getting better. And what we try to do is unpack and get into, like, who's making money off of it staying the way it is. So that's what we do. You can find all of our podcasts at thedrilldown.com and or on the podcast platform that you prefer. But yeah, we try to do that, and we're having a lot of success, and we have a lot of fun. And then they make fun of Peter Schweizer on a regular basis, which is pretty fun.
He's amazing too. So, I mean, I'm not going to make fun of him, because I respect this work too much. But I will say, I'm glad you guys are having that kind of fun, which means we can have that kind of fun by tuning in. Now, I saw links, because I typed your name into Google. But for those who are wanting the fastest way to get there, the Drilldown with Peter Schweizer, you go to the website. It's called thedrilldown.com. Easy to remember, thedrilldown.com. All the episodes are there, and you can start at the top, or you can be anal like me and go all the way back to the beginning and start back there, whichever you like, whatever you feel like you want to do. But it's thedrilldown.com. All right, Eric, close us out. Anything else we need to know here?
Well, I just want to say, Florida's ready for you whenever you and your husband are welcome to come back. We're here. And while Ron DeSantis remains America's governor, Florida's going to be a really fun state to watch starting next year. We've got, I think, a pretty fun and little tasty gubernatorial primary coming up for you guys in August. There's going to be Florida. Yeah. We got Byron Donalds. We got our current Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, who's like a Green Beret, who is a war hero and an amputee, who's like requalified as active duty despite, a number of injuries. So Florida's fun, and I think what happens in Florida will be very telling for where we're going as a country.
I can't wait to see how that cracks out. Two great guys running. Both of them have amazing ideas, different attributes, different skill sets. We'll see what happens. Florida is always, in my opinion, a leader and a bellwether. I really feel like, especially with the new influx of people who moved in, and they're not trying to make Florida New York. They're trying to keep Florida, Florida. That's pretty great. I'm very, very excited. So we'll see. We'll definitely talk to you again before then. And we're really grateful for your time tonight, especially up late. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And I would just say, to your point, it's probably Florida's fault that Virginia and New Jersey went the way they did, because like all the people that would have swung those states already moved here. So we're sorry for what's left.
Yeah, and but that's the thing. They had to leave because the lockdowns were so brutal. People didn't just up and move because, it's just time to move. They had roots. They cut those roots off, short them off, and moved for their sanity, for their kids, so their kids could play outside. It was real. I read a lot of op-eds and articles. I went on a lot of those websites where the people put the comments in and tell their stories. And people were sad to leave New York. Deep family roots. Virginia, too. Virginia used to be so red and so easy to live in. And now it is just a shell of itself. I know because my parents lived there, and I am there a lot.
Hey, you're talking to somebody who had 3 elementary school kids in the state of Florida, in 2020. So,
wow.
No, 1,000%. And, as I told Governor DeSantis one time, my wife had said, at that time, she said, look, I didn't vote for Ron DeSantis in 2018, but I'll hold a campaign sign for him in 2022. And that's one of the reasons why he won by 20%. I mean, it's real. Like, I know you got to go, but like COVID changed the math in terms of like, hey, it's not just about tax costs. It's like, oh my God, this impacts our daily life in a way I never imagined it would. That's why Florida won. That's why Ron DeSantis won. And I do think people kind of get that those are the stakes moving forward. And I think that's what you'll continue to see.
You're so right. But again, guys, when we turn out, we don't lose. So some of the problem a couple of weeks ago in that election was low voter turnout on the right. When we turn out, we don't lose. So we have to do the same thing we did for President Trump every time there's an election, because these candidates deserve the same kind of respect and turnout that President Trump got. I mean, he got shot in the face, so we owed him big time. But these candidates also need help too. They need us. So, Eric, we'll talk to you again. Good to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Stacy, my pleasure. Great to be with you. Have a great night.
All right. Have a great night.